Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5, Bonnie Strikes Back. Bonnie.
Wait, do you want me to read the second one of the last one? Or the
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
I don't think this is going to be Bonnie Strikes Back. Okay, number 2. What is the best way to reconcile the Old Testament and the New Testament for friends who are not believers, but are currently reading the Bible and trying to understand the consistent message between the two?
Oh, yes. Yes. All right, Bonnie, seeing as how you're translating the Bible, why don't you just take this one and run with it?
Okay. First of all, this is like such a bad pastoral answer, but I would read the Bible for sure. But I might start with a book
That's not a bad answer.
Instead, I might start with a book that explains the narrative scope of it. From like Genesis to Revelation, that like this is a one big long narrative, and then I would go and look up the passages. I think if you just start from Genesis and you just kind of plow through, I think you're setting yourself up for maybe a rough go in terms of a little bit of boredom and then not understanding it all. But I think,
is there a book off the top of your head that you would
probably N.T. Wright? Don't you think he has one like that?
Yeah, he has a book on the Bible called The Last Word. At least that's the old title. I think it's The Authority of Scripture. I think it's the new title, but he has a book on it where he presents Scripture as a story.
Yes.
That's really compelling.
Yes. So I would do that. And then what about that? Would the other book that we talked about, I haven't read it, or maybe it's just a theory. Where's his stuff about the fifth act?
No, that's in that one.
That's in that one. Okay, because that would be a good...
There's also a paper online. If you type in, how can the Bible be authoritative? You'll get a short paper that he wrote that introduces the 5-act play.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll find it and I'll post it to our social media this week so people could see it.
See?
I know, the millennials coming through. But I would start there in terms of breaking it up and seeing it as one overarching arc of a narrative is a lot more helpful, I think, than trying to... Because then you can kind of make sense of the pieces of it than just trying to kind of plow through it. That would be my...
yes.
Because the biggest points of connection for me when I was like learning about the narrative of Scripture is through the lens of Jesus and how Jesus fulfilled and also like mirrored. So the biggest one for me was the idea that, so you have, the story of the Exodus and the Israelites are saved and Moses takes them out and they're in the wilderness, about like paralleling that of Jesus saving us from slavery. And now we're sort of in the wilderness. So understanding like that some stuff in the Old Testament is mirrored in the New was a big point of help for me.
Huge. No, that's so good, Bonnie. I would say, Tim, look up what the Tim Mackey episode was that we did on the Old Testament. Ooh. What number that was. I'm gonna talk for a little bit while you look it up. But there is a episode we did with Tim Mackey. And it's one of my favorite episodes because I just sat and took notes as I was interviewing him. But it was on the Old Testament, and it was really, really good stuff. We also have an interview we did with Greg Boyd, who had written something he calls a cross-centered hermeneutic. Now, that's a fancy way of saying this, that Jesus is the clearest revelation we have of what God is like. And so, the New Testament, I mean, Jesus himself says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Right.
But then later New Testament writing is, hey, Jesus is the visible representation of the invisible God, or that Jesus is the exact representation of God's being. Or in Colossians, he is the fullness of deity dwelling in bodily form. Right? So the New Testament writers are saying, listen, the revelations, the pictures we have of God are true in the Old Testament. Now, I think sometimes they're more complex than what we think they are at first reading in English. So sometimes I think we're not understanding the picture correctly. That's something Mackey gets into. But I do think that what the New Testament is saying is, listen, the clearest picture of God that we have is Jesus of Nazareth. And so when you read the Old Testament, I think there's great value in reading the Old Testament on its own terms. I think there's great value in letting it be messy and weird, letting those weird stories and obscure laws just sit there. I think
Right.
it's really bad to try to clean it up, because if you do think that this is somehow what God wanted us to have, there's a reason why it was this way. So that's the interesting question to me. But
Right.
but if you're going to fit the whole story together, the key to that, of course, is Jesus of Nazareth. And what you begin to do is, as you read the 4 accounts of Jesus's ministry, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you begin to realize that what Jesus is doing is something called recapitulation. The idea that he is reframing in various parts, just like Bonnie said, or mirroring the Adam and Eve story, the Moses and Israel story, the Israel in the wilderness story, the Israel in the temple story. Like
Right.
he's actually redoing where Adam was called the son of God and he failed, and where Israel, the son of God, was called the son of God and it failed. Now here comes Jesus, who's engaging in the same types, the same patterns, the same pictures, but he's doing it in a way that accurately reflects God's character. The Old Testament is a book of triage. It is not a book of what God wanted. It is a book very much of God making do with human sin. It is not a book of God's will. And that is something Mackey makes a huge point. Where you see God's will most clearly is in how Jesus is human, how Jesus is Israel, how Jesus renews Israel, and how Jesus then invites us into a renewed kind of Israel vocation in the world. And so one of the things that Boyd will say, and I don't know that I go all the way with him on this, but if you see something that is in the Old Testament that seems to be attributed to God, but seems very much inconsistent with the person of Jesus, you have a couple of options. You can just disregard that piece, which I don't think is a wise idea. Or you can begin, and this is what Boyd argues, you can begin to try to find the way in which the character of God is manifested in that story, even though you might have to dig to do it. In other words, because Jesus was hanged as a criminal, so Jesus actually doing God's work, he looked like a criminal in that moment. Very often, Boyd argues, that God will look like the criminal in the Old Testament, but it's actually the people who are invoking God or acting on behalf of God who are the criminals. Does that make sense? That in the same way you look at Jesus hanging from a tree and go, that's not the Messiah, but he actually was, and the Messiah was nothing like that. In the Old Testament, you have something called divine accommodation, where God is allowing himself to be painted with an ugly brush for the sake of being present and associating with his people, but he's actually not like that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so Bonnie nailed. You have to see this as a unified story, but I don't think that allowing or chopping parts of the Old Testament off, I don't think that allows the story to be all it needs to be and all that it should be.
Right.
I think all of that stuff is there actually for a reason, but I think we misread it a lot of times. And one of the things that Mackey will say is that if there's something in the text I don't understand, I assume I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? The problem isn't with God, and the problem isn't with them.
Right. It's
that would
I
have
don't
made
get
sense in their culture. It's I don't get it.
Yeah. That's good.
And so if you start from a place where Jesus is the clearest revelation of God, then you can engage in those Old Testament passages with much more curiosity and much more joy than if you were just saying, oh my goodness, God seems schizophrenic.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Bueller? Anything?
That episode was episode number 101, How to Read the Bible, with guest Tim Mackey of the Bible Project. And the Boyd episode is episode 95, Angry God and Peaceful Jesus,
Boom.
with the guest Greg Boyd.
Oh, and the
Nice.
Bible Project's videos are very helpful.
Yeah.
All their stuff is really good.
Yeah. If Chris, if you're not a Bible Project junkie, they have podcast, YouTube channel, I just think it's some of the best stuff.
Yeah, even
out
on their
there
website.
right
They've
these
got
days.
really good stuff. Yeah.
They really do, and they wrestle a lot with these sorts of issues. So if I were encouraging my friends to check out the Old Testament, I wouldn't let them get off the hook by saying, "Hey, it just seems really contradicting." I would say, like, "Oh, what points?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd make sure they're actually engaging in the text and not just the idea that it's contradictory or inconsistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a second conversation with Mackie. Where is it? Oh, episode 169. How is the Old Testament authoritative for Jesus followers?
Yes.
So the first one's how to read the Bible. The second one deals kind of with just specifically the Old Testament and how we approach it.
That's cool.
And there's nothing to add to those. That
one,
they're just
that second one, the Old Testament one, I've listened to probably 5 or 6 times.
yeah, me too. It's so good. So anyway, Chris, thanks for the questions, and you, dear listener, thank you for the experiment of 5 episodes. Hey, would you let us know?
We have one more.
We have one more,
Do
but we're on episode 5.
Monday through Friday.
Bonnie struck back.
I guess that other one will wait.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many, but
Yeah.
yes, the thought was we would just do one per day.
Perfect. Sorry.
And no. And we'd love your feedback. Is this a good way to do this? Is this helpful? Is this more annoying, less annoying? By the next time you hear us, Bonnie will have had her tattoo. And
I'll be a changed
she might
person.
be a demon.
Oh
for
my
all we know, she
gosh!
might just turn literally into.
Erie, don't you know I have spiritual trauma and anxiety?
I do know. I'm sorry.
Gosh.
But I hope if it's like so over the top, it won't add to it. But
Exactly.
I guess that wasn't over the top enough.
It's the other way around. This is what keeps the Dementors at bay.
There you go. Thank you.
Oh boy. You know what I did? I will say this. So when the Harry Potter books came out, I would read 1, and then when 2 came out, I would read 1 again, and then 2.
Oh, because you had to wait a year between, yeah.
Yeah. So I've probably read them. I mean, and then I read them with my kids, and I don't know. I think if I'm ever going to get a tattoo, I literally want to get the verse reference that says "You shall not get tattoos."
That sounds exactly like something you would do.
And
I think as we sign off, you guys should each say what your Patronus is.
my Patronus, nice. All right, that's good. Tim, you go first.
My Patronus is Jeff Bridges.
Oh, I was going to say Neil Young, but Jeff Bridges.
You guys aren't doing animals?
No,
Jeff Patronus
Bridges.
can be anything.
Well,
I pull my wand out when those Dementors are coming, and Jeff Bridges walks out like the dude, and he pushes them.
Yes, the Big Lebowski. That's so great. All right, Bonnie, what would yours be?
well, I thought it just had to be an animal, so it was going to be a dolphin. Because
okay, now that we've, does it have to be? Does it have to be an animal?
well, it feels like it should.
Jeff Bridges is an animal.
But yeah, I guess it's.
Yes, that's true.
Otherwise,
That's
my
true.
other thought would be a food item. It would be like a cookie or a cup of coffee.
Oh, nice.
like
That's funny.
Throw the cup of coffee.
How
at
do you
the
keep the
Dementor.
Dementors at bay? I think about coffee.
Because you're well fueled and you can get through
Alert.
anything. The other day, I said, I have a headache. And so I said, oh, did you not have a latte? And I said, I did. In fact, I've had 4 shots of espresso. The problem is that yesterday I had 8.
Oh, boy.
I know, I really need to tone it down.
I'm no expert on health. That seems like a lot. That seems like a lot.
Okay, I'm sticking with dolphin.
Coursing through. Okay, dolphin. Not intimidating. I'm gonna go.
Excuse me. That's how the dolphin gets you. Is it seems nice and friendly, but then it's always attacking sharks and saving humans. That's why
It's a Dolphnado.
It's a Patronus. My Patronus.
My Patronus is gonna be, the number 62-39, which was the score of Ohio State's victory over Michigan last year.
Why don't you
And
make
one of
it
the
be
funnest
a
games
Buckeye?
I've ever. A Buckeye is a nut. And
Yeah,
it's
you
poisonous.
can have him like the.
It
Remember
is a
in Willow when he had
poisonous
the
nut.
acorns that would turn people into stone?
Oh yes.
That shows you how much I have no
good
idea.
Willow reference.
I've never about Buckeyes.
I know.
If we can tie up a theological conversation with a Willow reference, I feel like we're doing God's work.
I mean, 62 was that was the biggest beatdown Michigan has ever had. Nate and I were at the game, and it was Urban's last game. And so, yeah, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about the block punt in the third quarter, where 110,000 people were as loud as I've ever heard. The volume was deafening. That's my Patronus, and I'm sticking
Patronus
to
is
it.
just the Ohio State defensive line.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good
They just
one.
come running out of your wand. And
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Oh, you guys are awesome. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. If you made it through all 5, God bless you, and there's help. All right. Till next time, friends. Thanks.